Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Well, the disc nerfs are in and other healer tuning notes on April 15th, and we are diving into all the news as to what is going on. So far, no preservation and no resto druid changes, so we're jumping right into Mistweaver Monk, where Jade Empowerment, this is your crackling Jade lightning damage, is now increased by 2,000% on your primary target instead of 2,500%. And then cleaves at 25% effectiveness instead of 15% effectiveness. This has been kind of going down for a while, and I think what they're trying to really do is discourage running all the ancient teachings, talents that usually you're running in dungeons, but now you've been running in raids. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like a big driving reason behind these kind of nerfs. Shayloon's gift healing is increased by 15%. That's great to see. Through my own testing, I always felt like Shayloon's was just kind of more mediocre these days, so I like that. Rushing Wind Kick increases Renewing Mist healing by 200% instead of 150%. So people haven't been running ancient teachings, people have been running ancient teachings, Jadefire teachings, and not been running Rushing Wind Kick in raids for the entirety of Liberation of Undermine, really. So there seems like they're trying to kind of bring it back and sort of shift it back towards where they really wanted it to be, like it was in Nerebar Palace. Not sure if it's going to move the needle enough, but I like that they're sort of making these changes, and I really like that they're making the change to Shayloon's. That bursty healing feels so much better when it actually is like impactful and noticeable. And a lot of monks, I feel like, have been running Xiao Hao's lessons just to use Shayloon's more to like buff their other stats and give them those extra proc effects. So I'd be very curious to see if they start switching their talents now and start taking the increased cloud generation instead. But it is just a 15% buff. Cool to see, though. Shining Righteousness now only requires 4 Shield of the Righteous to activate your free Wog or Light of Dawn. Righteous Judgment chance. I think this is to actually get your consecrates down, isn't it? Something along those lines. Yeah, it's now a 100% chance to drop your consecrate. That's fine. I'm surprised it hasn't actually been 100% until now, but yay. Veneration transfers 280% damage done into healing instead of 225%. Well, people really haven't been running this talent for a while now, and it's just been, it's kind of like mediocre, like fluff healing, it almost feels like, but having a buff there could be really helpful for the spec when it comes to a lot of rot fights, so that would be nice. Just Reward healing increased by 80%. Light of the Martyr no longer transfers overheals into a healing absorb. That would be kind of interesting onto it. I'm a little surprised they didn't do anything with spenders with Paladin, though. Or even trying to make like Eternal Flames healing over time a little bit stronger. I feel like some of the areas that Paladin was like a little bit weaker on was like these steady healing encounters. And they still haven't really done much to sort of like take some of the power out of like the laser beams for Herald of the Sun and like put them more into like the HOTS or something along those lines, change around their healing profile. But hey, I mean, buffs are buffs. It seems kind of light though, from what I was really expecting. All right, now let's get into the juice. Disc has been performing beyond where we would like them to be, so reducing the impact of their shield, penance, and atonement output. Well, that's kind of everything. But Wheel of Woe now increases the absorb a powered shield by 5% a stack instead of 10%. So instead of your reliable max shield being buffed by 70% with Wheel and Woe, since you had 4 Penance Bolts out of Castigation, 3 out of Twin Sight, now you're going to be having around 35% consistently as your average bonus shield out of Wheel and Woe. That's actually a little bit less than I thought. I'm not going to lie. I was actually expecting more nerfs going into like preventative measures. The Prophet's Will shield value still stays into place, so that's really strong as well. I'm really surprised that they didn't do too much to shield's value going into some of these changes. Now, the penance damage and healing getting reduced, this is really important. So much of Disc's output, especially Oracle's output, is tied to their penance damage, penance healing. And the fact that they're nerfing the baseline penance ability instead of nerfing like preventative measures, I think is also pretty significant because that hits Void Weaver at the exact same time. This, I think, is probably the nerf that we're going to feel the most, especially in a dungeon environment. A lot of penance output is a little sneaky sometimes in dungeons where you might send out a penance out to an enemy and you have all kinds of modifiers juicing up your penance. So you might hit Shadow Fiend and be like, oh wow, like I'm just doing so much healing. I hit Shadow Fiend, hit Insight, and penance, shield, penance. And so much of the twin sight cleave healing doesn't quite get sort of like registered, or you don't immediately like feel it, but then you really see it in your overall output. So I think that this is going to be the most significant part of the nerf coming in. And I think it most heavily impacts a dungeon environment when it comes to like sustained healing output in particular. That's the area I think that Disc is going to struggle with. And I think that rot encounters like Candle King and Swamp Face might be quite a lot harder after these nerfs coming into play. Now, they are, of course, nerfing your atonement for your raid environment. They're basically trying to compensate for this by making it so your allies with atonement do receive healing for 28% of damage done instead of 32%. And then the atonement is 125% more effective outside of raids. So they're trying to make it so the atonement feels the same, but what you're really going to notice is the extra penance healing out of twin sight cleaves feel a lot more noticeable in a dungeon environment. When it comes to a raid environment, I really don't think much of this is a huge deal. The spec has been owning in raids, absolutely trouncing people in raids. Our ramps have already been like overhealing a bunch. So I think in some cases, this will bring down a lot of our healing outside of our ramp. Wheel and Woe nerfs do the same thing, drops your healing outside of your ramps in a raid environment, but really not that big of a deal. I think the spec's going to still be blasting when it comes to a raid, but I do think that when it comes to a key environment, we're really going to notice the lack of penance healing, especially when it comes to more sustained damage encounters. And it might even be a little bit more of a struggle of healing some of like the vulnerability phases. Things like Big Mama might be a little bit harder to heal. The fact that you can still stack up absorbs, have them incoming, preventing big spiky bursty damage is like a massive feather in the cap of the spec. Void Blast getting a little bit better for Void Weaver. I'd be curious how Void Weaver would feel when it comes to just raw HPS checks, something like Candle King, and just sort of see how it feels in that environment. I'd still say Oracle gets the nod from just the changes that I've seen thus far. Even though it's going to really suck having this penance nerf coming into play, I think that Disc is still going to be far away the best raid healer, and I think that there might be some more competition up at the top, but I think a lot of that is going to be due to possibly weaker healing when it comes to the like rot fights. I think that's like the really big point of contention that I'd be concerned about with these nerfs. But when it comes to dealing with most of the dungeons, still having your shields as your first line of defense, they're still really powerful. They still have really high duration. You still have tons of mitigation tools. I do think that the spec is still going to be on that S tier level for a Mythic Plus environment, but it might open up some windows for somebody else to sort of join him when specific encounters, specific dungeons just need mass amounts of output. Absolutely absurd amounts for like rot encounters, especially. But hey, not the end of the world or anything like that for Disc. It's still going to be in a really good position, and we still got some more gear to get. I'm mainly surprised that they didn't actually try to do some revamps in the process while they were nerfing Disc. That's what it really doesn't make any sense to me. I would like to see lenience just kind of be removed. It's just a busted tool that we have access to that I don't really think is super enjoyable to play with. I'm not like, wow, I get 2% damage reduction from my buds. I'd rather they just find some other cool talent to give to us or something like that instead. Obviously, it's going to feel a little bit worse than everything the second that you get a nerf. We'll get some more gear and everything. I think the spec is still going to be in a really strong position at the very least. Holy Priest, hey, they're getting some good stuff too. Holy Nova damage increased by 30%. Prayer of Healing increased by 15%. It's like that's the 10th Prayer of Healing buff lately. Prayerful Litany causes Poe to heal its primary target for 125% more. Whoa, what a 125% more of like 5. Woo. Prayer of Healing's mana cost, though, this is actually a pretty important one. It's been reduced by 10%. Prismatic Echoes increases your Echo of Light healing by a higher margin now, up to 15%, and Renew healing by up to 40% instead of the 30%. So these are pretty big buffs too. This talent has really been coming around with an Oracle style for Holy Priest, and I would not be surprised at all to see Oracle Holy Priest steadily get better, not only because of like buffs to things like Prismatic Echoes, buffs to things like Twin Sight, where you're now casting double the amount of prayer of mendings, or I guess the bonus prayer of mendings that you would have instead. That's really impactful as well. The all healing increase by 3% is really nice as well. So I would not be shocked to see Oracle Holy Priest steadily get some better representation. And part of that is not only because of just buffs like this, but also what I mentioned before with Disc Priest. As we keep getting these raid buffs, overheal for healers is just going to get stronger. You know, when you hit a Trank or hit a Convoke or hit or, you know, Divine Hymn or whatever, right? You're just naturally going to overheal a little bit more as you are getting more gear and as those raid buffs keep stacking up. And so having I kind of think of it as like a second chance with things like Piety to force your overheal into other targets and make your output more efficient. Well, Holy Priest has that too, and it's just going to get better. The overall 3% heal increase, and I guess some of the Twin Sight buffs are like small buffs for dungeons. I think you're already running Oracle Holy Priest in dungeons anyway, or at least you should be. And I think that you're going to steadily be chipping away at a better Oracle build for raiding. I really don't know about getting Prayer of Healing into that raid build. I think you could pull off a really good single target focus build without it already. But it seems like they're still trying to force or make Prayer of Healing better and more encouraging. So that's nice, at least. Be interesting to try. Farseer got some buffs for Resto Shaman. The Ancestor's Lava Burst damage been increased by 15%, and the Elemental Blast damage been increased by 15%. Because, you know, I guess they take those. I don't know. I'm kind of expecting Farseer Shaman to get something along the lines of like making your healing rain feel better to actually cast, or something to make it more convenient to really utilize. So pretty surprised that all they're doing is just trying to add damage buffs. That's exactly what they did in Dragonflight to make Farseer better. Or sorry, that's what they did in Season 1 of The War Within to try to make Farseer better. It didn't really do anything. And the spec had some like very, very limited representation. You still got great players like Lauren who are playing it at a high level, but I'm sure that they have some feedback or they have some good ideas on how to make Farseer a lot better. And it's weird seeing these tiny buffs compared to the heap of changes that Priest has gotten, right? Because both Discipline and Holy were kind of really comfortable in Voidweaver and Archon. You know, Shaman was really comfortable with Totemic. And the way they're going about buffing Farseer is like so light-handed, so like, here's a little buff here, here's a little buff there. Whereas a lot of the changes that they've been making, especially in 11.1, before the season even started, were like really trying to push Oracle and really trying to encourage it further. You know, that's a lot of what this is right here with the Prismatic Echoes. Definitely is trying to encourage more of the Renew gameplay. And they're not really doing that when it comes to Farseer Resto Shaman, which is kind of disappointing. Other disappointments is not really seeing anything for Prez Evoker. Prez hasn't been doing like bad or anything in raids, but it definitely was not there for World First, and you know, it's definitely a late bloomer, and it's definitely not as strong as like the Disc Ramp playstyle. And so while it's at like a fine level, when you're competing against another spec that has a similar niche like in Disc Priest, you really need to be more than fine. Otherwise, people are just gonna, you know, leave you by the wayside. So very surprised to see that. And honestly, I feel like Druid really benefits from like the no news is good news for the spec. I would not be surprised, especially as the season goes on, if there were like large disc nerfs. Resto Druid could benefit really heavily from that because they have obscene raw output, which would be really good for a lot of heal checks. But they really did not do much to bring down those shields. So Disc Priest stonks still up, and still looking really, really strong. We'll see what 11.15 brings us. And if you have any other thoughts on like what other changes should specifically be made in the near term, actually, no, I want to hear what you guys want to think about what should actually change, like talent changes, design type changes. What should change at 11.15? Let me know. Anyway, GG's. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the patrons for making all the content possible. You know, like and subscribe. All right. Okay, bye.